Okay, we
We're
are
live.
live.
We're live. Welcome to Mount Shasta for the Scratch Kitty on the Head show. Say hello to the audience out there in internet land, Ciclamina. Oh, I guess she's going to join us today. Hello, I'm your host of the Scratch Kitty on the Head show. My name is Golden Eagle. Yeah, look at that. Okay. We had questions. Questions. Let me see if I can remember the questions. Oh, yeah. Symbolism of the mysteries of Jesus.
What? I don't remember that.
Page 85. Page 85.
No. Well, in my book, it's page 88. Different edition. This edition was actually my dad's.
Oh, how cool.
He had bought that at my recommendation and read it, and so that's my dad's edition. This question is actually closely related to your second question, which are good questions, by the way. She had good questions. Switch to show her while we talk about her questions.
Her. Who's
She. There's a movie called She. It's really cheesy and bad.
It's actually from Monty Python's Life
Well,
of
there's
Brian.
that one too. There's another She.
I'll get my questions out.
So your other question was, what did the Templar Knights find in Jerusalem?
Where did these
They
questions come from? What am I missing? Were these things that were sent?
In our homework.
The Training and Work of an Initiate by Dion Fortune, a.k.a. Violet M. Firth. And she had questions that she emailed to me.
Oh, okay.
And they are good questions, so I thought I would take an opportunity to answer them here. It does actually tie into the theme of tonight, which is kicking our energy up a notch. So what exactly, everything, did the Templars get in Jerusalem when they went there? Has been a question that has confounded everybody for the last 1,000 years.
Karen's on.
Hi, Karen.
Oh, Karen is on. Hi, Karen.
Hi,
and,
Karen.
Aaron and Kathy
Aaron
Go
and
Team
Kathy.
Tampa. Hi, Aaron and Kathy.
and Lonnie. Hi,
Lonnie.
Lonnie.
Hi, Lonnie.
Good to see you.
Mohadib here.
Wadid.
Wadid.
And she said that she started reading your book today.
Yay.
Wadid did?
Yep.
How did she
No.
get it?
Is that true? Which book? Which book, Sarah?
Oh,
And then Dennis is here, and Maria,
I didn't realize Sarah had
Dennis
gotten
and
it.
Maria.
and William,
I will. How will you?
and Melody is in the back closet somewhere.
Well, Melody.
We've got a crowd, a virtual game.
right.
Yeah, virtual
Dune.
Toltec
She
game.
started reading Dune.
Well,
Yeah.
there could be a reason why I pointed her in the direction of that. I'm
You're
sure it
gonna-
was merely a coincidence.
You're gonna love it, Sarah.
Yeah, find out what book she started reading. I didn't realize she'd gotten a copy of my book.
No, the Dune.
The Dune. She started reading Dune.
Yes.
Oh. Paul Atreides. Watch his transformation. Okay? The Templar Knights, for those who are Earth historically challenged,
Reading my mind, I swear.
the Templar Knights were a group of poor warrior monks dedicated to protecting pilgrims on their way to worship and visit the Holy Land, which was the big thing to do back in the 1000 to roughly 1250 AD time frame. Supposedly, were found. Yay! Welcome.
Thank you. Hi.
Supposedly were founded by a group of 9 monks / knights for that purpose. They had a charter from the king of Jerusalem, who was a European guy from somewhere. I can't remember the first king of Jerusalem's name. To do that, and they would operate, and they have this big long nights of the blah 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 of the temple, and they lived near the temple grounds. They basically, the story is, they got access to the tunnels under what used to be King Solomon's temple. They found stuff, and they got knowledge from pockets of the adepts and initiates of the ancient mysteries that were still there, mostly Arabic, and at that point mostly Muslim rather than Judaic or Christian. And they took this stuff back home to Europe, and it revolutionized Europe and the Middle East to this very day. So there's always a speculation, what did they find, what was the knowledge? And essentially, I could do 10 shows on just this one subject, and we wouldn't have time. So you're going to get the Reader's Digest condensed version of scratching the surface of the tip of the iceberg. So you scratch the surface of the tip of the iceberg, take off a little bit of ice, and take a little bit about that, and that's what you're getting. The truth is, these weren't random knights who happened to go on a pilgrimage, who happened out of the goodness of their heart to decide to form an order to protect all these travelers. Because for the first 20 or 30 years, there were still only 9. It wasn't until they were getting old that they started bringing others into this order. So from the get-go, the math doesn't add up. It turns out they went there deliberately, looking for stuff that they knew was there. And they knew it was there because they were part of an underground tradition that dated back to the time of Christ, with the companions of Joseph of Arimathea and Mary Magdalene, who had settled in France after they fled Israel, or then it was called Judea, after the crucifixion of Christ, because of the political upheaval that was causing in small circles. So they fled for their lives, and they took knowledge with them. There has been a long 2,000-year tradition in the region of Europe, which is now southern France. Remember, France didn't exist until 1500s or so. There was never a country called France. The Franks weren't even in what is now France at that time. And this tradition that they had tapped into, either by blood or by initiation, is what caused them to learn that there was stuff, the important stuff to be had in Jerusalem. And so they went to get it. They did form a great order. They did develop basically the modern banking system. They had a series of safe houses all across Europe and the Middle East. And if you were traveling to Europe, or from Europe over there, it was a many months journey, either by sea or land. And you didn't want to be lugging all your money along with you, so you deposited it into a Templar stronghold before you left. You were given a receipt. You traveled over there, and it's like, okay, now you kept just enough money to pay for your expenses along the way. Then you get there and you need the rest of your money. You take your receipt over to the Templar stronghold, and it had all its stamps and approvals and counter signatures and all that. And they said, oh yeah, here's your money. And they charge you a tiny amount of interest for the service of making sure you got your money and your body safely to the other end. And then you turn around, you did the same thing back. So that was the origins, basically, of the modern banking system. So the knowledge portion of that is just like all the esoteric mystery tradition knowledge. It's codified in symbols. Keep in mind, we're trying to bring in these symbols from the higher planes. This is the language of the higher planes. All of those symbols carry energy. If you go to these old cathedrals in Europe, you can send energy to them, even though, well, let me back up. I was about to say something that's not necessarily correct. So you can send energy to them and you will get information that comes as gnosis or knowledge that you have no business knowing. You never read it, nobody ever told you, but now you know things. Right? The Templars held knowledge that had come to Judea from Egypt. So I think you're already starting to make the links. Where am I going? You know, so you don't get to say it.
She did have that look.
The Templars had the Akadwa. The Templar Knights held the energy. It was used in their initiation rituals, which were intended to transform consciousness. And they held the same exact energy that we do. So that was part of what they got. They got the energy, they got the knowledge, and they got stuff. There's a lot of speculation over what physically the stuff was, whether it was the Ark of the Covenant. There's some speculation that what the Romans took away wasn't it, although there's other speculation that the Templars got it, but they got it in Rome, from where the Romans had taken it, that maybe it was a part of the Holy Rood or the Christ. There's other speculation that it was the head of John the Baptist that had been preserved and buried under the temple, which doesn't entirely make sense, because John the Baptist, when he was executed, he was an enemy, right? So he wasn't a hero of either the Romans or the Israelite priesthood caste, consisting of the two main sects, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. He was, history does not seem to record exactly what was done with the body and head of John the Baptist, where they may have been buried after he was executed.
I thought the head was given to that chick.
Yeah, well, then what?
Well, she had it. It's her head, so I don't know why it would be. I never heard that it would have been somewhere where it could have been dug up and taken, but it is the age of relics, so
right.
They did that kind of
so thing. Anyway, there is no formal documented proof of what they got physically. Whatever it was important or deemed important, and probably the knowledge and the energy was the most important. So that was right around the time of 1000 AD. The Templars in the fullness of time became very powerful. Most of the kings of France, not France, most of the kings of Europe owed them money.
Mm-hmm.
And the Pope owed them a whole lot of money. So even though they were operating as a sect of priesthood under the auspices of the Roman Catholic Church, they were an independent order. They had at one point documents which basically gave them carte blanche to do anything they wanted at the behest of the Pope, and they could do whatever they wanted and get away with whatever they wanted. And the Pope had given them the writ that says, yeah, you can do that. That's how much power they had over the Pope. Until finally, in 1307, King Charles of France, one of the Charleses, I can't remember if it was the second or the third or the fourth.
I don't follow French kings.
Yeah, I don't either, especially when they're this evil. He got together with the Pope and they decided that they were going to set a trap because they were all tired of owing money to the Templars. And so on Friday the 13th, I think it was on October, they were going to had all these sealed warrants sent out all over Europe, and they were supposed to be opened on the same day all across Europe, and they were supposed to arrest all the Templars and throw them in prison word leaked out, and what the French and the Pope really wanted was the Templar treasury, which wasn't in any country. It was in their ships. So part of the Templars' response was a bunch of the old guys who were getting close to dying anyway offered themselves up as a sacrifice, allowed themselves to be arrested and tortured and burned at the stake over a period of several years, while everybody else escaped. So that's what happened. And nobody knows for sure where the treasure went. Everybody else is about the money. That's not the only reason you might want a big supply of gold. Gold carries a certain energy signature that can be used for many, many things. So some of them went to a region up in the Alps that's hard to get to physically because you got to climb up all these mountains. And they carved out some land that was bits and pieces of a number of different countries. And they said to all these other countries, all of whom owed them a lot of money, they said, thank you very much for the land. This is now ours. We are politically and officially neutral. We will not engage in wars and you will not attack us. Because if you try, we're calling in all your loans and then we'll get your whole country because you can't afford to pay us back. And they said, oh my, look at that. What a great little place up in the Alps. You should come up with a great name for this place. And they called it Switzerland. And that's how Switzerland was formed. It was by the Templars who fled the Pope. Most of them, however, ended up in another small country in the northern islands off the coast of Europe, a place that used to be called Albion, that you may better know by the name of Scotland. Scotland, not that I'm biased in any way, was the one and only country in Europe at the time that did not have to kiss the Pope's rear end. Their king had already been excommunicated for standing up for Scotland's rights, so they already couldn't do anything more to Scotland. And if you want to mount a crusade and go there, it's going to be really bad because, you know, Northern Europe in the winter, it's like you really don't want to go there and fight the Scots. So that's how the Templars mostly ended up concentrating in Scotland. And they greatly influenced Scottish history. Many of the Templar leaders were, in fact, from Scotland, certain families from which I and my consort are descended. So during the course of the 1300s, a lot of the Templars came to America. Not as widely publicized or well known as the Viking visits to America 400 or 500 years earlier. But nevertheless, they made it to America. There has been in the specific journals recorded in England, they describe specific locations where they had built encampments and done mining. You come over here to North America, and in those locations, you find mining remnants and camp remnants exactly as described in the old Templar journals. In Rhode Island, at a place called Newport, there is a huge stone tower, exactly like all the other big, round, huge stone towers the Templars built all across Europe and the Middle East. And it was there when the first European settlers got there in the 1600s. And they go, gee, oh my, who built this? We don't know, the Native Americans said. Most of them anyway. It's always been here. And then a few of them had remnants of like, oh yeah, some white guys with beard came along and built it a long time ago. That's the Newport Tower. You can go look it up. And I'm sure some of you who are at your computer watching this can pull up another window and you'll probably go do that. And you'll get a cool picture of it. Then some of the Templars went south. Actually, I got to follow up with Coyote. He owes me a reference on this. somewhere in the Yucatan, there is a stone carving of Templar knights doing stuff with the locals. So now that's full circle. Atlantis to Egypt to Jerusalem to the Templar Knights, back around to the other Atlantean descendants, and the energy kind of circled the Atlantic Ocean then. And the Templars went other places in North and South America and the Pacific Ocean. We won't go into that, it's not important. So all that symbolism is the symbolism of transformation. And I've been studying the Templars for years. A, it's part of my Masonic lineage. B, it's part of my familial lineage. And C, it's part of my shamanic lineage. So that's why I study it, and I'm a kind of a geek on this kind of stuff. Kinda? I hear you all saying.
Ah, Ishtara is online.
Who is?
Ishtara
Yes,
is?
yes. Hi,
Who?
Louise.
Louise!
Louise! Mwah.
Of course she is, coming in on the Templars.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
So the symbolism of their knowledge is about transformation. That's what it's all about. It's about the higher planes. And this is the same thing that Christ, that reference in the book, Ishtar, what we're talking about is questions that Yvonne had about one of the books for the assigned reading, which is called The Training and Work of the Initiate by Dion Fortune. And one of the later chapters in there had some questions about historical references to symbolism. Now you're all up to speed. So Christ, the individual we now call Jesus Christ, studied and was trained in one of the esoteric mystery schools from which sprung the Templars, called the Essenes. The Essene stronghold is where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, for those of you keeping score at home. Christ is also known to have trained and studied and been initiated in Egypt, where the Nag Hammadi texts were found, which talk about, there's a certain amount of overlap between what's in the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi Scrolls, and then there's overlap with the modern versions of the Bible we have, as well as all the other Gnostic Gospels, and we're all got a piece of the bullseye of the target there with all those systems. And so the book I recommend, it's right over there. After we're done, I'll get it out and show you. For the Christ mysteries, symbolism you're talking about, it's all in the Bible if you get the right version, which we have over here. And somebody's going to ask the question. I'm going to have to get it out. Provided you learn how to read between the lines and access the higher text. For those of you who've never done that, you can be reading a text and you'll go back later and try to find what you've read before and it's not there because it isn't in the physical form, it's in the higher plane version. So that's how a lot of when you access and you read something and it's symbolic, you're accessing the higher plane version of that. So in order to do that, you have to develop your ability to go astral. And you're basically accessing the Akashic records at that point. And then you'll get the download as long as you have a good reason. Say, I want to know this so I can sell it on the internet and get rich. And they'll say, never mind. Say, I want to know this so I can transform myself and transform humanity. And I need to know how to do all this stuff. And they'll say, oh, okay, well, here. Work with this page and see what you do. And then if you got that down, they'll say, okay, now you get to turn the page and see the next version of that.
You
So
got
that-
to see the whole book.
That's okay. I got to see the whole book of one book. Okay.
Right.
So but it's not the only time I've read those higher plane books. So there's lots of higher plane books. You got to know that too. And you never will have enough time to see all of it.
It's a little bit like your dad's library, kind of times a billion.
Yeah. No, I haven't even begun to bring home all my dad's books that he left me. So I only brought home about 3 boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got cases and cases and cases of books to bring home.
Sure.
So the symbolism you're talking about is the symbolism of transformation. So studying symbolism is one of the things that we all should be doing. And it ties in with what I wanted to talk about tonight, which is energy. And how to kick up the energy a notch. You can't learn too much on this quest. So yeah, you got to be a little bit like me and become a geek and read all this stuff and study it and then go meditate with the higher plane versions and your guides and the ancestors, and as you hone in on your true will, what you're here to do, the stuff you will be shown, the things you will learn, and what you will be guided to are the things you need to do your job. If your job and my job are different, I'm not going to be shown what you need that's uniquely yours. You will if you prepare yourself. And you're not going to be shown what's uniquely mine. And that's the same for all of us here. So we have these physical bodies. We talk about the chakras. You've heard me describe about how each chakra is really several concentric chakras. So each of our concentric bodies, and energy bodies or light bodies as we call them, have their own set of chakras. But we have a lot more going on in our energy anatomy than just the chakras. There's the main chakras, which everybody draws the picture of, and that's been, the holy grail in a lot of systems is weaken your chakras and move the chakras and do this to your chakras. And my response has become, why just the chakras? Why not all of it? Why not all your light bodies and all the energy organs in there? One of the main ones, which you can find reference to, is called the Antakarana. A-N-T, I could read your mind. A-H, Anta, K-A-R-A-N-A, I think. Don't quote me on that. I wouldn't bet on it. But you have to remember this is being translated from Sanskrit, which has sounds and letters with no English equivalent. So I'm going to call that one good. The Antakarana is a key link between your crown centers, and there's more than one crown center, and your throat centers and your heart centers. Collectively, it forms like this kind of if you draw it graphically, there's like a three-dimensional, a very long, skinny, three-sided triangle from the heart to the throat up to the crown, and then directly from the heart to the crown, right? So it's kind of a long, skinny triangle, and each one of those has 3 chords. Each one of those 3 legs has 3 chords, and that's a key link for very specific types of information. It's sometimes referred to as the Rainbow Bridge, which is related to partially though independent of the terminology in the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, also called the Rainbow Bridge, made famous in the Thor movies about Norse mythology, which refer to the Rainbow Bridge. They show a physical bridge. It's Hollywood, right? So the Rainbow Bridge and the Kabbalistic Tree of Life are the three paths that lead up the tree from Malkuth. And so each one of those three pieces of the Rainbow Bridge carries slightly different information. And one of them is more or less developed when you're born. The other two we have to work on. And it's sort of like muscles, right? Yeah, in theory, when you're born, the day you're born, you have all your muscles. But there's a big difference between a newborn infant and its ability to use and control its muscles and a fully grown adult, right? There's growth and development that has to happen. And the same is true with our energy bodies. And you develop these by engaging in the higher work with a pure intent. And so you have to start exercising the Antakarana. And it's one of those, the need will drive the development situations. If you never develop any sense of doing the higher work, your Antakarana will stay dormant. And so every time you meditate, etc., every time you're doing this work with pure intent, you start to develop your Antakarana. And so that's probably one of the more important of the internal energy structures. Is there a question?
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but would these be related to the like 3 higher centrums?
They're kind of related to the centrums, which I was going to talk about in just a little bit. So there's energy structures and energy pathways that are independent of the classical Chinese medicine meridians and independent of the 7 main chakras. And so you can learn to see them and sense them. And this is something you do best when you learn to use your etheric body and your etheric vision. You don't need the astral for that. You get into that state of meditation that I've taught, and it's kind of like something Coyote's written about for the dreaming, where you withdraw your awareness from your physical senses and you activate the dreaming senses. You can do the same thing with the etheric body, which is basically your dreaming body. And you pay attention to that. Yeah, it's still there. I just checked. My Antakarana is still there. And scan your own etheric body. Look for the Antakarana. See if all 3 of the chords are developed. And look for your other energy structures. You know, nose around. It's your body. You have a right to look at it, right? And see what needs work, what needs development. And then when you're in that meditative state, you can ask your higher mind, your guides, your angel, whatever, what you need to develop each area that is weak. So this is another level of difficulty, and not difficulty, another level of complexity to add to the meditative work you're already doing. So the reason we do this is those channels bring in very specific information, and they help you accelerate your ability to more fully develop your higher bodies. And that's what's required to really channel high levels of energy is more strongly and specifically developing and deliberately developing your energy bodies and the links between them to the physical body. And so yeah, that's just like going to the weight room at the gym. You gotta practice this. You learn to handle high levels of energy and high levels of higher plane information by practicing that, by raising the amount of energy that you bring in and bringing in more and more information that should all be pertaining to your personal true will, your work in the world. Some of that will overlap with the school's work, for those of you who are following this path as a student in the school. And if not, that's okay. You still have your work. You still have what you are supposed to be doing. And the Akadwa, for those of you who hold it, is this really cool, powerful tool that's gone all around the world many times and has been held by many, many different organizations and groups of people who are all working for the benefit of all beings everywhere. So start scanning your body, looking for these energy organs, and learn how to use it. Learn how to get up in your etheric body and walk to the other room and see something that's there and come back, leaving your physical body here the whole time, and then know what's there.
Was that part of the higher body relay exercises?
It can be. The higher body relay that Boria just asked about is a course on primarily healing work that's done with the Akadwa that requires you to be a level 4 to do the higher body relay. I can't teach it until you're level 4. Coyote can't teach it until you're level 4. Once you're level 4, we can teach it to you. EJ actually has a book on astral projection.
Mm-hmm.
It's related to his remote viewing book. They're 2 books. And in the astral book, he gives some good exercises for developing your astral ability. And the first step, he says, is don't worry about your astral body yet. Get your etheric body going. Otherwise, you're trying to jump 2 levels, and it's easier to jump 1 and then 1. Mm-hmm. So he has a lot of exercises about how to use your etheric body. Activate it, learn to control it, guide it, etc.
So I was thinking about like some practical exercises because there's a lot. I know that Coyote's book, The Golden Flower, is a good way of developing these other bodies, and you know there's specific instruction there. But also working with the American Book of the Dead, and the instructions that come along with that, and the training in the Labyrinth Readers course to train to be able to be a reader for those who are in transition. Whether that's your goal or not, the training is specifically designed to bring your attention to these different aspects and to place your attention there and then move your attention, so which is one of the key aspects in these different examples that need to be acquired in order to be able to really do what you're suggesting, right?
Yeah. I would say the ABD is excellent training for all the work we do. And helping others in transition is one of the highest acts of service we can do. So even if you never become a really, really good ABD reader, just having the ABD and using it can be incredibly powerful. And especially when people really are in transition. It's very useful. I read passages while my dad was passing, and he and I were communicating really well right up until the end. He's in his final week. He goes into the hospital about a week before he passed, and he's still on the phone making calls trying to help other people.
That's really cool.
A good example for us all to follow. And so, yeah, I was reading the ABD, right up until he passed, and especially the clear light. There's a passage, if you read the ABD, it's called the clear light, and we can work with that after if you want. So, channeling the high levels of energy involves total power. It involves frequency work, and it involves the data content of the energy. So from a physics standpoint, that's frequency, it's the amplitude, it's how many streams simultaneously you can process, and it's the total flux of energy. Does that make sense? Yeah. And we practice those. Using the Akadwa frequencies is a really good exercise to get used to doing this. Pick two, any two, and start running them together. Find out what they're good for. Remember that with those 7 frequencies, when you do the math, which I've done, there's actually 127 different possible combinations of 2 or more frequencies that you can work with. There's combinations of 6, there's combinations of 5, there's combinations of 4, 3, and 2. And when you add up all that, it comes to 127. If anybody wants, call me afterwards and I will give you the math equation to figure that out. You can double check my work.
Okay.
No, you can do it. It's look up any math book, any good math book. Of course, I don't know what they're teaching in this Common Core math they're ramming down students' throats these days. Practice running 2 frequencies and get good at that, and then switch to a different 2, and then play with all the different combinations of 2. Make a list, and then find out what they're good for and use them. It's not just a theoretical exercise. Use them. I found a new healing use for, what was it the other day I used?
Volcanic and oceanic. No, it was obsidian and oceanic.
Yeah, obsidian and oceanic. I don't remember what I called it, but I needed those 2 in the moment, so that's what I used, was obsidian and oceanic. It wasn't obsidian and volcanic, which I use a lot. It was obsidian and oceanic. Or volcanic and oceanic I use a lot. But this was one of my first times using that. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So do that. That gets you frequency control, and then start accelerating the power. And then the amplitude is kind of like the loudness. So the difference between my voice now and my voice now is the amplitude of the wavelengths. Frequency was the same. It's the amplitude that went up. So all that contributes to the total power. Then when you feel comfortable with any combination of 2 frequencies, go up to 3, etc. Right? Get used to using the energy in different places. It's really great to have a temple space that we do a banishment and a purging and a clearing, and it's this nice pristine environment, and yeah, we can all run energy here. Now go out in the world. Go to a park. Go to an airport and run the energy there. Just sit down like a well-behaved traveler and start sending energy out. Don't hold the intent to affect anybody. It's just you energizing the space. Take notes, see what happens. I think I'll do that in a couple of days when I'm traveling. Compare running the energy outdoors with shoes on to running the same energy outdoors barefoot in the same place. Then put your shoes on, off, and learn to recognize the differences. What can you do in one way that you can't in the other? Because there's going to be things both ways, right? Your ability to hold your attention on what you're doing with this is going to become more and more important. If you take a 1.5 volt D cell battery and you have a piece of wire taped to the end of each end, like with electrical tape, and you've got hot wires, you can go ding, 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 you can zap people and nothing bad's going to happen. Go up to a 12 volt automobile battery and you're going to notice, oh, well, you go up to the 110 volt wall socket over here and it'll wake you up. Sometimes even if you're dead. I think I'm joking. You go up
You're
to,
telling us to experiment now.
but not on 110. Okay. I'm telling you to experiment with the Ikadu. I'm using this as an analogy.
I get it.
You go up to a 220 volt outlet and you start, it will make you dead. And anything above that, you know, you could get vaporized. And then you'll be food for bacteria then. Because there won't be anything bigger left that anything else would want to eat. Just poof, and then this dust floats away. Right? 10,000 volts coming out of Shasta Dam down the road. Yeah. Zap. I remember the first time I was in physics lab in college, and we were doing this thing where it's called the black box test, right? They give you a box with these different places where you can hook up power and make measurements with voltmeters and oscilloscopes, and you're supposed to figure out the circuit that's inside without physically opening up the box. And most of the boxes will have warning, okay, this is the hot, this is the ground, and if you hook it up the wrong way, smoke starts drifting out of the box. And we had a visiting professor one year when I was in lab, and he was British English. And he had the classic English accent, and we had just done that, and we're sitting there going, and the smoke starts drifting, and he smells it and walks in, oh, somebody fried one, okay, well, let's open it up and fix that. So yeah, poof, it all turns to smoke. Don't do that. But your attention to handle large amounts of energy, the attention to detail becomes important, and your attention to be able to place it on your higher bodies. So this is, you know, the work we do, the drills we've done on second attention and maybe even third. That'll be a nice start when you're up to like fourth and fifth attention to handle these high levels of energy. You've got to learn to split your consciousness. So you're consciously aware and looking at the world with the worlds with your points of view from each of your bodies simultaneously. First, you learn to go put your consciousness in your etheric or your astral or your mental and so on. And now you've got to have it there simultaneously. And the best way to learn to control that is what Coyote has taught with respect to the dreaming, which is all part of this work, and dreaming every night is great practice for this, is withdraw your attention from your physical senses and place it on the senses of your dreaming body. Once you gain experience with that, it can happen instantly. Most people start to do that at that boundary time between waking and sleeping. So learn to do that deliberately at will. So, knowing what you know about the Akaduan energy and Toltec work, what's the next step after doing everything I've described? You can answer this one, if you think of it.
I guess it's kind of a broad question. You just talked about a lot of stuff, so can you be more specific on what you're talking about?
What do Toltecs do?
We do work for the benefit of all beings
How?
using the Akadawa.
How?
Raising the
Akadawa on.
vibration.
What was that?
Raising the vibration, the frequencies.
And? What was it you were saying?
I just said Akadawa on.
How? Well, yeah. How do we like to work?
As a group?
Ding, ding,
There
ding,
we
ding,
go.
ding. We do all of that I just described as a group. As a group. 3 dings and 1 answer.
I really don't think the setup questions helped me with the answer. It's just,
And yet she got it right.
She's just that good.
And we didn't even plan this ahead of time.
right?
Yeah.
She's a dinger.
The really high levels of energy we will do as a group.
Of course.
As a group. And what we do with that energy, we'll talk about when we get there. In the meantime, start practicing with multiple frequencies, start activating and getting acquainted with your energy bodies and your energy organs, especially your Antakarana. Learn to however you access the higher plane information. Some people see it, some people sense it, know it, however it works for you.
So these things, these energy systems, they don't necessarily have a physical location. I mean, everything's in the etheric, so
Well,
is there some kind of a...
they
Well,
don't
some
have
things do.
they don't have a physical organ counterpart.
Okay.
You can think of a lot of times as what happens on the higher planes manifests later, right? So in terms of the evolution of the human organism to a higher capability being to facilitate the transformation of our essential selves, our essences, this is partly what the human organism will look like in years to come. You know, we may, in fact, have
So
physical...
we're helping to evolve.
Yes, this is
ourselves.
accelerating evolution.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So we're using this, we're working it, we're making these connections. So the physical evolution helps, and like EJ's book, the human biological machine becomes a tool as a transformational apparatus, the target for which is the essence. As the essence evolves greater capabilities, that triggers that evolution of the physical form down the planes into the physical body. And remember, DNA is an information receiver, not just hard coding that says you're female, I'm male. Some of you, most of you are, shorter than me, I'm taller and uglier, so that's all DNA, right? But that's not all DNA does. DNA is an antenna. It receives information being transmitted through these subtle energies directly from source. We just have to learn how to listen. We knew it once.
Supposedly your hair is also antennas.
Why do you think mine is long? Yeah, long hair is an antenna.
Yeah, because the scouts, the Native American scouts, the white man goes, cut their hair, right?
Mhm.
And they couldn't scout anymore.
Right.
Then once their hair grew out.
They did that in the Army too, in the Vietnam War era.
Yeah.
They actually ran measurable tests. So once your hair gets 4 inches long or longer, then that really enhances your ability to sense and perceive the subtle energies. So your extrasensory perception, it's just the non-physical senses. It's the energetic senses, because your etheric body has organs of sensation. It has a few more than the physical body does. And all ESP is, and all intuition is, all telepathy is learning how to listen to that information, which is all enhanced by the Akadwa. So yeah, ultimately we're going to get a bunch of people in the same place at the same time and do cool stuff.
That sounds like fun.
about right. Yeah.
That sounds good.
Wow.
Junior's 14.
No. I'll suffer for however long we go tonight.
The martyr.
Well, I don't want to interrupt just to get another half a glass of tea. It's any questions?
Mohadib would
Mohadib.
like to know when we are going to do some group work.
What time is it? You want to do it right now?
Sure.
Okay. So we're going to put your notebooks down. Sit comfortably. Get in that classic meditation position, no crossed arms or legs. Align with the spine with gravity. Deep breath in, relax into the posture. Activate your Akadwa. And now envision the body that's a half an inch in each direction larger than your physical body. Sense that body. And cause it to glow a brilliant golden yellow. Now, most of you who are watching this, at least in real time, know where the city of Teotihuacan is, northeast of Mexico City. Envision yourselves standing there in the plaza at the base of the Temple of the Moon at the north end. See your golden yellow glowing body connecting with all the others as we stand in a circle before the Temple of the Moon. From the pyramid, the Temple of the Moon, Feel the energy flowing up from the earth and down from above, combining in that space, and then flowing into the circle. Feel the whirlwind as this energy rushes around through each of us. Now, pulling in this energy, this dual energy, from the temple of the moon, accelerate it with our intent, and we're going to send a message into the human collective consciousness field. Kick it up. Somebody is slipping. Focus. Pull in more energy from the temple. There we go. And the message is, God lives. Love is the answer. We are all one. Peace now. Keep this energy flow going from the pyramid of the moon into our circle and then up into the human collective consciousness. All right, slow the flow down from the temple. Slow the flow through our circle. And then gradually pull your fields back in. Wiggle your fingers and toes. Get your bodies back aligned, and then open your eyes. Now, what did any of you experience?
That was awesome.
Mm-hmm. The temple lit up.
Mm-hmm.
We all lit up.
We
Yeah.
all lit up.
We all lit up. I don't know if anybody maybe online can answer this, or anybody here had your eyes open to see what happened to the space here.
What space?
You've heard us talk about the mist. It got so thick here you couldn't see across. I couldn't see across the room.
Cool.
It was like, oh yeah. And then it started to go away at one point. That's why I knew people were losing the attention and concentration. So that was 5 minutes.
It was?
Wow.
Roughly. That was it. Now, imagine doing that for an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Just that. That's some of what we're preparing for.
Okay.
Right?
Mm.
Any comments from online? Okay, everybody watching online, type something to let me know you're back.
I did notice an extra field of beings around us. Were they observing?
That's the Toltec ancestors.
The ancestors.
Teotihuacan.
Yeah, they were
Yeah.
holding space.
Yeah. Yeah, that's who we work with. That's our buds. Our peeps.
The temples were happy that we were doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's part of what they're for.
It was like a hurricane in the middle.
Yep.
And I know what a hurricane feels like. You're right. I've been in a hurricane.
Well,
So have I.
Yeah.
So I know. Yeah.
So you and I know.
Yes.
And tornadoes. I don't know if you've ever been in a...
Was it a
well,
floor?
not in the tornado. It was like half a mile away when it decided to turn, and I was on one of the barrier islands on the coast of Florida,
Oh wow.
and I was heading right up, and the piece of land is only like a quarter mile wide, and there's only one road, and all of a sudden this tornado comes up and starts coming right down the road at me. I'm like,
There's nowhere to
great.
go.
I got nowhere to go. And so I'm just about to do a U-turn in the middle of the highway and turn head back. And it took another turn and went out to sea. And on the way, it went through a construction site where they were building like a new apartment complex or something. And I saw this stuff flying up in the air, and then it went out. Like I get down there, what had flown up in the air was like pallet loads of 4x8 sheets of plywood.
Did you see boards through trees? That's the
No, I saw
freakiest thing.
sheets of plywood coming down through cars.
Wow.
They went, and they came down and destroying a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah, that's the power of the vortex.
Yeah.
That is the power of the atmospheric frequency when you do it right.
So I don't know. Melody said something like toroidal Toltecs. What space?
Toroidal Toltecs?
Yeah. She says she's back. Mohadeep is back. Maria says, I'm checking the GCP dot in 7 minutes. I have no idea what that means.
Oh, okay.
Ishtara says, feels so good. Aaron, let's see, wow, awesome. From Aaron and Kathy, room is still buzzing. William says, I felt a lot of energy. Melody says she still feels it.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
What Maria's talking about is just send everybody the link again, Maria, or post it on Facebook somehow. It's a random number generator that it's one of those things that measures the effect of human consciousness, if you will. It's sort of like the double slit experiments that have been done where people think about this physical experiment and they cause it to shift, right? Because it's all just energy in waves, right? So yeah, I'll be curious to know what happens with that, Maria. Your book was mailed today, Maria, by the way.
I feel that that exercise, if you want to call it an exercise, has changed my body.
Just now.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
For the better or the worse?
No, better.
Oh,
Something
good. Yeah.
something happened that
Yeah.
it's not as dense as before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
She accessed her inner rabbit.
So that's a sampler of some of what we'll be doing and some of what's possible with this work.
I could really see with the example of pogging and the idea of being little green dots on a video screen and holding together and creating almost your own little shape or symbol because of pogging together. As we each had our balls of light or that we were emitting, and we ended up in Teotihuacan, I got sucked in there before you even gave the instruction. So
You were already there.
So I saw everybody's lights lighting up as it came in, and then you said to form a circle, and then they all formed a little circle, and so it was like watching, the pogging on a video screen almost.
Yeah.
How cool is
I was
that?
seeing it from a lot of different perspectives.
I have a question. Can you use something like that? Like there's a volcano in Mexico that's erupting.
Right now there is one?
Yeah, and it's not being televised at all. It's near Mexico City.
Which one? Popocatépetl?
Yeah, that one.
It erupts like every other week.
Well, anyhow, can that be used to help nature and humanity for the lava flow, or if a tornado's coming in or a hurricane to contain it?
Well,
Or is that interfering with
that might be interfering, because if the Earth is going through transformation and you stop it, it'd be like telling somebody who's exercising and perspiring heavily, oh, I can fix that. I can close up all your sweat pores.
Okay.
Then where does the heat go, right? Where does the pressure get relieved? And I wouldn't do anything like that personally unless I talked to Mother Earth
Mm-hmm.
and the shamans of that place. I suspect there's probably people down, shamans down there who are probably on it.
Mhm.
And that's not our neighborhood. Mount Shasta starts to go, then we're on it. But again, we'll be working with all the other energies of this place. And when Mount Shasta goes, what we'll do is we'll guide the lava, hopefully, in a direction where it will do the least amount of damage.
That's what I
Now,
was
if
wondering.
we get really good, what we'll do is we'll have the lava flow go up through the air, still as liquid lava, all the way to Washington, D.C., and go splat on all the politicians.
I'm gonna say not yet, but when we get really good.
Yeah, when we get
That would
this.
be one heck of a rainbow bridge.
Right.
That would be a really cool rainbow bridge. Yeah.
Well, the Native Americans refer as the Rainbow Bridge when you die, right?
Well, that's what
Yeah.
your consciousness does, right? It withdraws from this physical body. So it's in a lot of lore because it looks like a rainbow, and the filaments can be multicolored as they go through you. So, but yeah, so they're not always talking about the same rainbow bridge because there's more than one,
Oh, okay.
right? So yeah, learn to make friends with your energy bodies and look at the organs and use the Akagwa for this. This is now what I had alluded to a while ago. We're moving in a new direction, which is the next logical step for the work we're doing. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question.
Okay.
It's about the frequencies.
Okay.
So, in my observations, these frequencies with the Akajua are very interplanetary. They're like, other than unnamed, it just goes as far as solar, right? So solar and then continue to this earth, besides living and
Right.
unnamed. Why is that? Why are the frequencies just contained to this?
First of all, they're
Space.
not. But the main reason is the Akadu as a whole is a solar energy. The whole family is originating from the sun. It's not originating from the other side of the galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
Now that said, when I downloaded the fullness of the Jaguar frequency, there is a component that I call planetary, which is kind of the mix of the other small planets in our neighborhood, combined with what I call stellar. So there is an energy frequency which we get tiny amounts of from every star that's out there that we can see. And that background energy comes through most during when we turn on Jaguar. Because when you go out and you see the total eclipse of the sun and boom, the solar disk is gone, all you're seeing is this faint glow of the corona, which is maybe half the brightness of a full moon. Then you see all these other stars, and I could feel all that energy. And I go, aha, that was my little aha moment. But I had to be in the zone of totality. So they're there. And technically, what we call solar, there's an infinite amount of planets out there. They all have that. So we mostly have just those frequencies because this whole family of the Akadu is coming from our sun. And this is our neighborhood where we're working. Our physical forms are here. Our planet is here. This is where we're working.
So it's localized frequencies.
It's like that. Now you go to any other planet, and there's going to be an equivalent set of frequencies that the people there can tap into if they ever figure it out. And some probably have, and some probably haven't. And look at the people here on this planet who haven't figured this out. When we're talking a tiny fraction who has. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. So I had a couple things to say to that. One is it is a spectrum that we have access to in this space. So it's just like we know that there's other frequencies above and below on the spectrum, but that's the field, just like when we see a prism, we're not seeing ultraviolet and infrared, which are still in the spectrum, but this is the usable spot. Another thing is that I'm not exactly sure how this relates, but I think it's important in this discussion of this is that you don't necessarily take the Akadua with you when you pass away. So that means that it's something that can be used in this manifested reality. So it's a tool for here, and I only say that because we have never been advised to, be trying to give the Akadua to somebody who's already passed on. That it's in one way it's affecting the energies of this reality. And one other aspect of that is it's not just our sun. Our sun is connected to the central sun. So Coyote had done an early lecture when the Kadua first came out, talking about the sun, our sun, as a porthole to the other deep central sun of the universe. So going through a series of different suns in order to get here, and so it seems like all of that kind of plays in there somehow. I'm not exactly sure about, but in some way, it's a spectrum of reality that we have to work with here. And so it seems like it's not that it's only for here, it's not that it's the only part of the spectrum, but it's the part that we have access to in this reality.
Yeah. Localized frequency.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So when you think of it, spectrums.
Helping people in their transition, you wouldn't be talking about giving them the Akadawa at that point as
Yeah,
they're
you could.
transitioning.
Well, maybe not right at the moment of transition. You could
But
give it to them
beforehand
leading up to
help
it.
them.
My dad was a level 2 holder,
Okay.
so for instance.
It's going to always assist them in whatever they're going through. So, like, my sister had a terminal disease, and I gave her the Akadua about 6 months before she passed.
Yeah.
And I know that it assisted her in her process. So, but I'm not exactly sure of the nature of how to state that you can't take it with you, because I don't know if that's quite
That
right
gets
or not.
complicated.
Yeah.
So, for now, let's assume that that's correct.
Localized frequency.
Any other questions?
What about, because Dion says to study symbolism and know it, and folklore and blah blah blah.
Yeah,
So
mythology and all
yeah.
that.
So what about Toltec symbolism?
What
Are
about
we
it?
gonna learn more about the symbols?
Well, yeah. What do you want to? We'll look at that. I mean, there's some. The symbolism of the Toltecs is pretty much the same symbolism as most ancient cultures. Most of these ancient symbols are all tapping into the same source. So you're going to see the point within the circle, you're going to see the swastika, you're going to see the triangle, very strong Toltec one. The butterfly is really just the Toltecized version of the yin-yang symbol, and all that implies in terms of the original. But yeah, it's there. I mean, you do a better job than most of tapping in visually to the higher planes of Toltec. So you will probably be the person who will do better at bringing through the symbols than probably anybody that I know right now, except maybe Coyote or Kachora.
The thing is, we're talking about 13,000 years worth of history. So the Toltec lineage is going to go back through Atlantis.
In Egypt.
So that includes, Atlantean, it includes Egyptian, it includes,
Templar.
thousands of years worth of, the Anunnaki and the fact that the Toltec weren't really an individuated culture.
They were the mystery school. They were the healers, the priests, the scientists, the architects. And so it would be, very much like the Freemasons of that day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and the knowledge was in Hawaii. You know, it went a long way to get there, but it got there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more that can be said about that, which won't be pertinent tonight.
So can either one of you recommend a good book that covers a lot of symbolism that, through many traditions?
I'll show you a couple after we're done.
Okay, great. Thanks.
I think the church word stuff would be good for her. Any other questions? What
Did
about,
you add more questions?
I have like 1,000 bazillion questions.
Right.
Well,
Are
ask
they
one.
pertaining to this discourse? I'm not sure. So,
Okay.
what are your other questions?
well, you know, I start thinking about this. You know, about the localized frequencies and understanding frequencies, understanding the intrinsic data fields between the frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
And then my question is because I'm always thinking of different perspectives, and I'm thinking for me, on a different perspective, it almost feels that localized frequency is almost limiting to, you know,
Well,
in a way.
when people here are starting with nothing, this is a first step. There's more I can tell you later about
Okay.
that. In the meantime, start pondering the true meaning of wave-particle duality.
Oh, well, you know, I could go off on that one like crazy. but-
Because, you know, when you start talking about intrinsic data fields between the frequencies, it's that wave, that dual nature of a wave and a particle.
Mhm.
The wave and the frequency aspect only pertains while the energy is being transmitted.
Or while it's being observed.
Yeah, well, no, when it's being observed or generated, it behaves more like a particle.
Right, but it's still a frequency.
Yes, it's both at the same time, and with a three-dimensional brain, it's really hard to understand that one. So we have to go up to the higher brain to understand it.
Mhm.
That's what Tesla could do. That's what Einstein could do a little bit, although not as well as Tesla, by both of their admissions. Tesla once had some pretty unkind things to say about Einstein, but Einstein was like, well, yeah, I'm not as smart as Tesla. You know, he admitted that too. So that's, I think, what you're looking for. And I don't completely understand wave-particle duality, at least not to a point I could put it in words. You haven't read Dancing Wooly Masters yet, have you?
I haven't gotten it in the mail yet. It's
You'll
on
get it.
order.
Read it when you're not reading something else important. And
I got tons
then
of books at home.
meditate on it,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Go look. You have that ability. So, yeah, go look. What else? Anything else? I'll have something for you later after we're done.
Okay, I just have a slight observation with our group
Uh-huh.
travel today to the temple there. How everybody's reflection was that was very hurricane-y, tornado-y.
Mhm.
You know, I didn't feel that chaotic energy or that swirly. Like I felt more peaceful, calm. Like I almost could maybe feel like it was misty, you know, instead of the.
Well, the mist was
the-
strong.
Instead, that to me felt strong. But I
Yeah.
didn't feel like a hurricane-y, tornado-y. So
It-
I'm wondering, did I like, you know,
No,
jump
you
somewhere
didn't miss
else, or
it. It was swirling,
I felt the swirl, but I didn't
but
feel.
it wasn't
the roar.
chaotic.
No.
It's a difference.
Yeah, it was
People
a peaceful
describe
swirl.
it as this because we're used to tornadoes and hurricanes, and that's what we think of. The energy's moving, but it's not like it was going to knock us over.
No.
Okay.
It was a controlled spin.
Yeah.
It was interesting because I thought you did direct us at one point with the movement of the energy, and so that could have been where some of the images came from. But
No, I just said move it around, and then we send it up.
okay, so there's a lot of direction to that. So I was almost envisioning the energy coming down through the temple,
Mhm.
and then to our circle as if it would come down at the Masonic altar into the.
That's
what-
what I saw.
What I said also was up from the earth and down from
Mhm.
above,
Yeah.
combine and come to us,
Mhm.
circle, and then we send it back up.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay, but you never said send it back up. You said send it to the collective consciousness, which, so
Could be in all
I-
directions. Yeah, you're right.
I felt a distinct shift for me when the loop was made of the energy coming and going back up. It was like a U-turn.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And so yeah, there was a lot of energy going on. There was a lot of things happening. I don't know that I would call it chaotic unless you're not used to that. And so knowing how and where to direct the energy, comes from listening to the guide and being and staying together as a group. And so in that way, I think we held that well.
You did good.
So
This was a good exercise. It was good training, and it was real work. It wasn't just practice. That really happened. That message really went out into the collective consciousness more strongly than any one of us could alone.
Which is the beauty and magic of doing this work together.
right.
Exactly. Yeah. Any other questions, comments, complaints?
Don't go there.
Oh, those are the most fun.
So Maria says that the dot was on the way up. We made it waver and hold its place.
Okay, so that was good. So that was with 5 minutes of work. So when we get up to an hour, then we'll.
So you finish the answering my questions, the rest of them?
Okay.
I mean, in the email?
Hold on, I'm in the middle of asking
Oh,
Maria's
sorry.
questions.
Oh, sorry.
So she also asked when we were talking about the Akadua is if we're reincarnated, do we still have the Akadua? I guess what it is I get the sense that the vibrational frequencies have to do with this biological machine. And when this biological machine is gone, the Akadua is not reacting on it the same way. So you would have to get a new biological machine before the Akadua would act upon it.
And that said, there is a resonance in your essential self that will attract it to you in your next incarnation. I know
Or like what's your
so many people, myself included, who were looking for something and we didn't know what, and we hoped that we would recognize it when we find it, and then all of a sudden a cod and go, oh, that's it, and we're there.
And what's her face? Is it Jessica? No, down south
Yeah.
that already had it and just had to have it activated.
Well, yeah, she had something.
Something.
Yeah. And so she was given a transmission, but she came up here and it wasn't as strong. And so when we redid her level 1 transmission, all of a sudden it was like, bam, it was there.
So I have a question. So the Templars are part of our ancestors.
Yeah.
Are they? I mean, are they? Is that the direct lineage, or is that they held the same?
They held the same stuff, and we know they made contact in Central America. How much contact remains to be seen. I haven't actually asked the ancestors that question. I've gotten confirmation that they were there.
And are you saying that the Akadua then came with the Templars in the direct lineage, or was the Akadua already here?
The Akadua was already here. It was here, and when they got here, that's how they recognized each other.
Okay.
So what were the secret Israel initiations the Templars had that Dion was talking about?
I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
Okay.
You're in a school,
Mm-hmm.
so do what's on your plate. Don't worry about other stuff. Anything else online?
Serenity says hi.
Hi, Serenity.
Hey, Serenity.
Stellan's in the other room.
Hi, Stellan.
No, I
Hi,
think they all
Stella.
left a long time ago.
Oh, they did? Oh, I
okay.
didn't know that. I thought they were, anyway. Well, if he's not in that room, then he's in that room. Okay, we'll stop here. And, oh, before you log out, no broadcast next week.
Okay.
We're traveling, so we will not broadcast. We'll be back in 2 weeks.
Yay.
Yay.
All right, now we can go.
Okay. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Do good, avoid evil.
Do good, avoid evil.
Thank you. I like that.